Here's a quick video I'm going to shoot just to look at wrist position while you're changing your Django chords. Just got your email, so I'm going to fire off a quick video just to sort of give you some pointers and directions. And I'm going to go through this a bit more thoroughly and a bit more deeply in the web guitar class. But just to get you moving forward in the short term, let's have a look at wrist position now. So in terms of the Django chords, here's the D with a relatively straight wrist position, okay? And this is exactly what we're aiming for. Now, it doesn't matter if your thumb is laying up along the neck or whether it's placed on the back, okay? What we don't want is our thumb to be on the back in such a way that it forces the wrist to turn and to bend. Okay, I'm just holding a D chord here, Django D chord, yeah. So we don't want it to be placed in such a position that the wrist bends. It doesn't matter exactly where your thumb is. I know some people put a lot of emphasis on that, but what is important is the straightness of your wrist. If your wrist can be relatively straight and you can grip the chord there, then your thumb position is fine. Now, what happens with some people, a tendency is as you reach over to these more further reaching chords such as the G, Django G is the sort of the worst for it really, is that the wrist goes into a curve. The wrist is bending away there. It's really quite an angle. Okay, now this position is really not what we want as we play. It's going to cause problems and it's going to cause constrictions. Basically, the more bent that your wrist is, the more limited the movement and control of your fingers is. So we want to keep our wrists relatively straight all the time. Now the way to do that is actually have your fingers and your hand, all of the knuckles, not just your fingertips and the knuckles at the end of your fingers taking up the bend, but actually the knuckles across, you know, just above the palm of your hand will be taking up the bend to get the fingers in place rather than the wrist. So rather than this, where my fingers are straighter, okay, but the tips of them are bending, my whole fingers bend in order to try to keep the wrist straight. Now, the thing is, you might have built a bit of a habit and be used to having your wrist in this position. Okay, now what I would say is, it's not always possible to have your wrist perfectly straight, but it is possible to have it relatively straight. So you're going to be purposefully, each time you play, just checking that you're in a better position, in a more straighter position than you usually are, every time you do it. And over time, you will get back into the kind of optimum position. You might find it throws your fingers out, it throws your accuracy and your speed out for a bit, but in the long run, it's way, way more important, and it won't take long to get used to this stuff. Your fingers will find it easier in not too long. So wrist relatively straight there, hand taking up the bend, okay, onto the G. So there's a Django D chord, there's a Django G, a C, an E minor, an A. Okay, you can see there's a little bit of muscle being pulled. You can see the sort of tendons in my wrist there going as I move around, but I'm not using too much pressure and I'm not really changing the angle of my wrist. It's all in the fingers and the hand. My hand is in a relatively stable position. I can do that as well with the thumb position like this, but it's a bit trickier. You have to be a bit more accurate with the fingertips, so having a bit of an edge is fine. My hand is actually in contact. It doesn't have to be. You can have a very slight gap with the bottom neck of the guitar as well. That's important. Don't be too far away, because in this kind of position, my hand is really far away from, I don't know if you can see this, from the neck of the guitar there. This is a better position, straight wrist, okay? My hand is up there. My fingers are bent over. It doesn't have to be in contact, okay? But just a slight gap, fingers bent over, not the bent wrist kind of position, which is this, which will inhibit the movement of your fingers. It'll slow down your chord movements, and it'll make everything more difficult in the long run, all in all. So it's all about your wrist position.